and bosses, how y'all doing? To all our moms in the group, a happy belated Mother's Day. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you were celebrated. I know for some people that can also be a very challenging time and weekend. So also seeing all of you who maybe might have had some complicated feelings, emotions this weekend. Just wanting to see everyone in that. But as a stepmom, you get all the hats from me go off to you because it is no joke being a mom and running a business. So I have so many clients who are full-time moms, not stepmoms like me, and I just, man, I really see you in that. So that is the real deal. And let's see, what can I tell you before we dive in today? We've got exciting stuff. We've got a free masterclass next week that I'm getting very excited about. If you haven't signed up already, we're going to dive into behind the scenes look at who I had to become to make reoccurring multi-five-figure cash months and how to define and own your role as a CEO for big results on repeat. Really what I want to dive into is the importance of reoccurring revenue. I think so often we talk about making 10K, 20K, 100K month once, which is great and celebration worthy, but what I've seen after the last 7 years in business, and I've been making reoccurring multi-five-figure cash months for for a long time now, for many years now, and what I just see is how having that reoccurring revenue, whether that's 5 figures, multi-five figures, 6 figures, how that really is the sustainability and safety in your business. I think that's where so much peace comes from. And sometimes we just look at the pop moments and we don't look at that. So I want to talk about the importance of that. I'm going to share so much of what we talk about is strategy. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Strategy is so important in your business, but we sometimes forget to look at not just mindset, but the identity piece, which is what I'm talking about, your role as a CEO. This is such a core foundational part of business and really what goes into allowing you to set yourself up to be able to make that kind of money. Because if it was just strategy and if it was just action, I always joke that everyone who took the same $97 workshop from so-and-so online would have the same results. We know that's not the case. So we're going to dig into all of that next week. Got a really fun practice that I created during my acting days that I still use myself, that I walk my clients through often, that I'm going to be walking you through as well. So I hope you will join me. I'll make sure we drop a link for that afterwards. Hi, Lila. Super excited for next week's masterclass. I am too. I think it'll be a fun one. Also, if you're on Instagram and you tried to sign up, here are the fun things. Even when you're making great money in business and you have a team, sometimes mistakes happen. We had the link to our last masterclass up. So if you tried to sign up, you probably signed up for our last masterclass, which is still a great one. There's instant access to it. But if you're on Instagram and you didn't get the right link, DM me CEO role and I will make sure you get the right link to join us. So that happened. Other fun news tomorrow on Instagram, I'm doing Instagram industry chat with my client and dear friend, Tilly Arrington, who's a CEO, and she's a strategist and thought partner. We're going to be looking at delegating and team efficiencies and really looking at that and being able to do that like a CEO from that CEO role, because that's so much of her zone of genius and what she does as an OBM and as a strategic thought partner. And that's really what I'm doing in my business with my team and supporting clients with. So that should be a really fun conversation. That's tomorrow at 5 Eastern on Instagram. And let's see, what other fun things? Oh, and if you say hi, if you're here live like Lilith, and you say hi, you will be entered to win a copy of my 6-week sales course, Sell Out Without Feeling Like a Sellout. It walks you through the mindset and strategy of selling without the ick. It is a full sales course. It is damn good in my opinion. Lilith, right now, you're in the running for this, and anyone who watches live while we're live and leaves a comment, you'll be entered. We'll pick a winner at the end of that and give that away. We always do a giveaway because I want to thank you for being here. I know there's a million places online you could hang out, and I also selfishly love when we get to have a conversation because I get to hear more of your questions and what you want and need from the live stream. Cassie says, hello, excited to hear today's live. Hey, Cassie, nice to have you here. We've got 2 people in for this entry now. All right, so let's chat today, our topic on the table. We are going to be talking about something, gosh, I think this comes up for every client at every stage of business, and that's we're going to be talking about objections, but really what I want to talk about today is looking at objections through a couple different lenses and how to have your potential clients overcome their own objections. So let me just walk through the bullets that I'm going to cover, and as I'm going through this, if you have questions, reflections, throw them at me. I want to make sure we're digging into this in a way that really serves you. I'm going to speak a little bit about objections and what I mean when I'm saying objections, because I think that word itself can be a little bit sticky, especially if you're someone who's service driven when it comes to selling, and what I don't mean. We're going to talk about how your mindset around sales objections can shift at the various levels in business, and how I see the different ways people are thinking at whether you're building, growing, or scaling, and that way they're thinking about sales objections. affect navigating those with clients and really the first objection to overcome. We're going to talk about really some simple shifts you can make to change the game in the way you're approaching sales, so you can remove both the ick, but have it more likely that clients will overcome those objections on their own. And I say this from the experience as someone who's been in business for 7 years. I have a 90% closing rate on sales calls, and I've had so many sales conversations with people who literally sell me on why they should be my client. And I don't mean that to brag, but just from the place of what we're going to be talking about today, so you know why you should even listen to me, that I'm not just like pulling this because I watched someone's webinar. This is from 7 years of experience, and who I walk through and watch clients or potential clients who become clients walk themselves through their own objections. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. And just a different way to maybe play and think about how to navigate this. And then I'm also going to share the secret behind having a 90% closing rate, because I think that can sound like, wait, say what? And I want to be really transparent around that. And also one of the strategies I use to allow for that, and why that serves me at this stage in business, but why that might also not be the strategy for you to play with depending on where you're at in business, so that we can be really clear about that. And then the last piece we're going to dig into is the truth about objections. That has nothing to do with what you're charging. It has nothing to do with having clients who are, successful, not successful, that we don't always want to hear or talk about, that I think really has a big impact on your ability to book clients and make money in business. All right, well, let me just pull up my notes because I feel like I have a lot here. I want to make sure that I don't skip over. Lilith says, I already have it. Absolutely loved the course. Gonna go through it again, so please give that brilliance to someone else. You're so generous. I love you. Thank you, and thank you for saying that. And she says, that's so cool. I haven't met many people who have a 90% closing rate, but it's fascinating. I'm going to share about that, though, because I think, we can just start. We can start there, and then I will go into the whole objection piece, because I think this is actually helpful for people to hear. I do have a 90% closing rate, and I will explain more of that later, but I think just like the short little nugget here to say is, part of the reason for that is I'm fully booked. So when I have spots open up, I have limited spots open up, which usually means I am screening for right fit leads and screening for and qualifying leads in a different way than I would be qualifying leads as if I were at the stage of building my business and booking out my business. And what that also means is I've been in business for 7 years. I put out a ton of content. I put out a ton of content to overcome objections, to have people get to know, like, and trust me. So usually if I have limited spots opening up and I have all of this other material for people to get to know me, by the time someone's on a phone call with me to talk about working with me, there's been a lot of pre-sales done to both pre-qualify someone, but to have them overcome their own objections, to sell them, to work through a lot of the sales process, where usually we're just finally having that last conversation to see, are we actually a fit, but not to go through the, like, who am I, what do I do? Like, usually people know when they get on the phone with me, I'm probably the person they want to hire, and we're kind of just doing that last fit test. So yes, I'm really great at sales, but part of the reason I'm great at sales is what we're going to talking about today is that I do a lot on the front end before I ever have a conversation with someone. It's not because I have some secret sentence I say to overcome someone's objection where it's like, and then because I say this one thing, people hire me, and that's why I close 90% of my sales, or I have this special practice I do. So that's part of the transparency around that. I think just because of where I'm at, the way I'm screening for leads. If I were, when I was getting fully booked, when I was offering lots of free calls, right, and I had 20 something spots to fill, I still had a great closing rate because of the content and stuff we were putting out front, but it probably wasn't as high simply because I was speaking to more and more people. And I honestly think if you are needing to fill lots of spots and your closing rate is too high at a certain point, I also wonder if people's rates are in the right place, or if they're screening in the right way, because we can also have a really high closing rate if we just say yes to everyone who's not a fit. So I'll explain that more, but that feels like a little transparency to, yes, I'm super proud of that, and also for some context, because I think sometimes we can hear that and make ourselves wrong. Cassie says, which is amazing, I want your knowledge bombs. So efficient, love it. Lola says, hi, co-working with you today. Hi, Shari. So many fun people on today. Okay, so before, because I went a little off track because I wanted to respond to what Lola was saying, but let's just talk about the word objection for a moment before we dig into some of the more, just the thought process behind this and how to have potential clients overcome their own objections. So let's clean up what that word objection means and why that matters, because I think we hear objection again and we hear like navigate sales objections, and I think so often the general way we think about that in business really can lend itself more to that thought of like, now we have to be pushy, now we have to convince someone. If someone has an objection, they're saying no, and our job is to try to figure out how to turn a no into a yes. And I mean, even if I say that out loud, how gross does that sound? How we won't even talk about what that sounds like, because anyone who's listening can understand that. That's not what this conversation is about at all. So when I talk about navigating objections or overcoming objections, I guess is what people usually say, I'm a big no to that, right? We're not going to overcome someone's objection. We're not going to overcome someone's no. We're not going to try to convince someone who doesn't want what we have to offer to become a yes. For me, that is just a big fuck no. And when I think about sales, and I say this all the time, I'm just going to, so we have the same groundwork here. I think about sales as a process in which we are helping people in front of us get clear on what it is they want. Do they want what we have to offer? Do they not want what they have to offer? Which means we have to help educate them on what it is we sell and offer and why that might be a fit. We're going to help them get clear enough what they want or not, and then help them to move towards what it is they want. So if someone says, hey, I want what you have to offer, but I'm a human and I have some resistance coming up, I have some fear coming up, I have some questions coming up, I have some concerns coming up, I am someone who really likes to think through before I spend my money, and I want to be able to work through some of this stuff. I am not sure if you are who you say you are, because our online space is a little funky right now, right? If those are coming up, that's what I would consider an objection. And that's an objection to someone who's a yes to what you have to offer. Oh, sorry, not who's a yes to what you have to offer, but they have an objection in a form of resistance or a question. That's what I want us to think about with objections. And then, in my opinion, you can all have your own opinion. I think then it is our job to support someone to get clear on what it is they want and to be able to move towards what that is. So if they're a yes, but they have some resistance coming up, I see it as our job to help someone move through that resistance to be able to make that clear decision. That's how I think of navigating objections. I do not think of it as, now let's convince someone to be a yes who's a no, or if someone has some sticky stuff coming up, let's try to just either run away and avoid it because that feels yucky, or just tell them why they should be a yes. That to me does not feel like the most supportive way to go about this. So that's helpful to understand what I'm saying in terms of what objection means. Shari says, AKA manipulation. Yeah, exactly. Manipulation, gaslighting people. I mean, there's just so many phrases we could use here, but there's just a lot of, yes, manipulation is just a good simple way. So no one in this group wants to do that, and I think that's why so many people resist sales or think navigating objections is a bad, yucky, icky word. We're looking at this in a completely different way. I really think of this more as, this is what coaching is all about. Even if you're not a coach, when you're having a sales conversation, you are coaching someone. In coaching, if we boil down life coaching to its basics, what are we doing? We're helping someone get clear on what they want. We create usually a goal, and then helping them move towards that and make that happen, right? That's really what a sales conversation is. And objections, I think of it more as, and we are humans, right? If I have a goal of I want to get in shape, and that's what I want to move towards, I might also have human resistance that comes up, and I might need support to move through that resistance to be able to reach that goal. So that's what we're talking about here. So maybe this is also helpful for everyone, and then we'll dig into the other pieces. I think of this difference too. I've had someone DM me recently. I don't usually throw shade, but we're going to use this as an example because you don't know who this is. DM me. I didn't ask, wasn't interested in what they wanted, and I told them I wasn't interested in what they wanted, and they kept trying to overcome my objection. I never raised my hand to be sold to. I never said I was interested. They just cold DM'd me, and when I said no thank you, they saw that as an objection to overcome. That's not what we're talking about here. What we are talking about, I keep talking about the gym I joined. I joined a new gym. That was something I wanted, but I had some resistance. I had some questions. I was like, do I really want to spend my money on a gym when I have one in my building and there's one across the street? Is there enough of a difference with the classes and all of that for me to spend my money? Those were objections I had, and I needed someone to walk me through those to be able to make my decision, and I'm so grateful that they did. So that's the difference there, if that's helpful for everyone, just to be able to think through, so we're not coming into this thinking, I only want potential clients to overcome their own objections because I think objections are gross and I don't want to have to navigate them myself. That's not what this conversation is about. I also want to empower everyone here to see there are times when it is so of service to lean into those conversations. Lilith says, yeah, totally agree. Had a client call where she said she wanted the exact step-by-step to make 10K, regardless of what she has to do. But then she said she didn't want to do anything that she didn't like. So all I did was make her aware of that conflict she had between her mind and her heart. That's a beautiful example of what you're talking about, of what we're talking about here, right? And we'll go through some examples there, but I think it's so much there. That is coaching, and that is, instead of making someone wrong or telling someone what to think or telling someone how to decide, it's helping, it's being a mirror, right? And helping someone see the options and helping someone see some of those conflicts. And that's such a beautiful example of what we're going to be talking about today, and helping people overcome their own objections for you, or with you, maybe is a better way to say that. So first place to start with, because I think this is helpful, I think sometimes our brains like to think that when you're at a certain stage of business, people are never going to have objections again, and you're never going to have to deal with them. Or that if you have a 90% closing rate, people never have objections. That's not the case at all, right? I just shared some of the reason, the secret, the truth behind why that's the case. For the 90% closing rate, it's not because people don't have objections. I still have people who have objections. They're just often being addressed at a different stage or in a different way in my sales process at this point. But I want to talk about how I think we can just get in our own ways at different stages of business, because I think this goes into then how to have potential clients overcome their own objections as well. Because if we don't see this and we don't know how we're creating objections ourselves essentially in business with our own thinking, it's very tough to know how to support others through that. So when, let me just make sure I have my notes here, because there were a couple things I want to touch on. Okay, so what I see is when and this is generally speaking, obviously this is not everyone. I feel like everyone gets that, but I'm not talking to everyone one-on-one. So I'm talking in generalizations here, pluck what feels true to you here, but as just some general things to think about. What I notice for a lot of my clients who are starting their businesses for the first time, who are building a business, who are learning their sales process, right? Where this is new territory. Even though everyone sells all day in their regular life, I really believe it is a little different when we attach money to our work versus like selling your kids on going to bed. And what I see then is oftentimes what feels tough in terms of navigating objections at that stage is a lot of times you at that stage haven't overcome some of the objections your clients have as well in yourself, and or you think it's really gross or manipulative, like we were talking about, to lean in to have those conversations with someone around objections. So I think those are two big pieces there, and that's not the whole conversation we're going to have today. I don't want to unpack that necessarily too much because I'll go down rabbit holes, but I think this is helpful to see, like, it's tough to have a potential client overcome their own objection or to navigate that or to walk them through that. And I'm going to walk through some practical steps there and how you can do that. But it's tough to do that if what a potential client is saying to you, or what you're finding everyone's objection is that maybe you would want to address in content, if secretly you're sort of like, I actually think that's true, and I kind of wish they would overcome this, because if they overcome this, that will prove to me that this isn't true. And you're kind of asking potential clients to do the mindset work you really need to do, right? It's just going to be really, really tough to either walk someone through that or to have someone walk themselves through that. Let me know if that's making sense. So I think that is one of the biggest things I see usually when people are starting in this process. I think the other thing, just to really normalize this is the other reason why I have a 90% closing sales rate. I mean, there are multiple reasons, but this is one of the reasons, is when you're starting your business, you don't have the same social proof. You don't have the same trust and relationships built up with people. You don't necessarily have the same level of expertise, even if you're taking it from another industry to bring into yours. And that's not wrong, that's not bad. Everyone starts there. When I started my business, I didn't have testimonials. I did 100 coaching sessions for free for that reason, before charging for coaching at all, for that exact reason, right? And I'm not suggesting everyone go do 100 free coaching sessions before charging at all. This was 7 years ago, a different time. That's not necessarily the way to do things. But in terms of, there are other things that come into play in terms of what helps a potential client overcome their own objections. And some of those are things we sometimes make ourselves wrong for, and to see those are just things that get built up over time. And that's just a hurdle. And that just means it might just be a couple more things to walk through with a potential client when you're building your business that you might not have to walk through 7 years later. And that doesn't mean one is better or worse than the other, right? It just means these are different stages of business. And it's sort of like if you're building a building and you're on the different floor, one's not better than the other, but we kind of need the floor underneath the next floor to support that for you to get to the next floor and the next floor. So just normalizing, yes, if like social proof is going to make it easier for navigating objections or having someone navigate that for themselves. So hopefully that makes sense there. What I see though, and this is the reason I want to bring this up, is I think sometimes we think, great, so once I've gone through all of that, I'm making 6 figures or multi-6 figures or 7 figures. People will never have objections again. I'll never have to navigate that. Everyone will walk through that themselves. And I want to simply highlight, just to create like the awareness bubble, just to like, hey, like just check in with this for yourself, because I have clients at every stage of business, and this is something I see sometimes for clients who are a little further along. What I think can sometimes make it more challenging to sell when you're further along in business, and further along, not better or worse, just in terms of the different stage and like how long you've been in business. Building, growing, scaling is how I think about the phases of business. They're just different dots on the same journey. Again, one is not better than the other. It's not a freaking race, just different dots on the exact same journey. But what I notice is maybe when a client is growing or scaling, sometimes what can make it harder to have your potential clients overcome objections for themselves, or even to navigate those objections with people at that stage, is one of the things I notice a lot is the further removed you get from having investments feel scary, or from being at that place where you were when you started your business, right? 7 years into business for me now, making investments and being a potential client feels very different for me now than it did 7 years ago. I'm just that much further removed. And the further removed I am, the further it's easier to forget, like, oh my gosh, all of the scaries that came up, all of the objections I had as a potential client that I needed someone to walk me through, not because I didn't want what they were selling, not because I didn't want to invest, not because I didn't want to be all in, but because I was a human at a different stage that hadn't worked through some of my fears and insecurities, right? And so what I see for clients who are a little further along is they've just worked through some of those. They've literally overcome some of those objections in themselves as a potential client on the client side, and they're just further and further removed. And I find sometimes, while that is a beautiful thing, it can also mean it's very easy to look at potential clients and be like, well, if they have an objection, they just don't want it. Or I only want to work with people who know they're all in already. Or like, why would even someone be scared? Like, this is a no-brainer, right? And not from a cocky way or like an attitude-ish way, but just from the place of, I think it can almost become an unintentional block where we forget, no, people can still have objections, people can still have fears. That doesn't mean your program isn't great. That doesn't mean people don't want it. That doesn't mean they're not going to be a great client. It simply means they're at a different place in their brain when it comes to buying and making investments. So that's just something I think, just the further out you get from your own experience with that, I think just the more it can be helpful to have that reminder. And I don't know if empathy is the right word there, but I think just remembering that that's sometimes a way we can push away clients and not create opportunities for someone to navigate, work through an objection, or to have someone even walk themselves through their own objection, because we can just create that story that means they're a no, or they wouldn't be a good client, or they wouldn't be a good fit, or I only work with people who are ready at this level, or they would never be ready. And I honestly think it can cause people to leave a lot of money on the table, and in a way where I gave a client a loving hard time about this recently, but in a way where if you're making a certain amount of money and you don't need more money, it's very easy to like almost not notice that this is a challenge or a problem, but it is a challenge or a problem that will catch up over time. Because if you have programs you want to fill, and if it's about more than the money for you, and it's also about the impact and the work you want to deliver, it really is a way to miss out on working with incredible clients and serving people, simply because there's this narrative here that if someone isn't a yes or has anything come up that looks like a potential objection that, they're not ready or they're not going to be a good fit for your program. Okay, comment I'm going to see here. Layla says, question, as people progress and have objections at each level, are these the same similar objections as they had at the previous level, or are there new objections that pop up? Lilith, I'm curious if what I just said answer that, or if you're asking something different. As people progress and have objections at each level, are there the same objections? Do you mean that as a potential client, as you're growing, do your objections change? I think maybe that's what you mean. So like if I use myself as an example, I'm now in a growing, scaling phase of business. Do the objections I have when I make an investment, are they different than maybe the objections I had when I was building my business? I think that's what you mean. Or do you mean, let me know if you mean something different. Yes, it's the potential client, Lila says. I think potentially, I don't want to say that across the board for everyone, but what I found to be true for many of us is a lot of times we have the same thoughts and patterns and fears and objections come up for us at every level. I think the difference is we tend to be quicker and faster in noticing them and moving through them and overcoming them with ourselves. And most of us tend to have, I've done a live stream on the different buying decisions, the different buyer personas and the way we make buying and purchasing decisions. Most of us have one or two that we tend to gravitate towards the most. And again, similar patterns or thoughts or objections will come up for us. If I use myself for an example, I'm a pretty quick decision maker, and I'm also someone who really likes to know that I'm going to get the most out of an investment and show up for it. So kind of the objection I have, no matter what stage I'm at or how much money I'm making, is always going to be, the gym's such a good example of, yes, I can make a decision quickly. I know I want this. I have the money for this. I made the decision within a day, but my question was quite literally, does this make sense for me to, am I going to show up to use this investment? And it was more like a checking in with myself thing. That's something that I had 7 years ago when I didn't have money to invest in things, and when I do have money to invest in things. So I think some people might have different things come up, but I think a lot of times it's, again, similar. It's like most mindset things. I find for most of my clients, as they make more money, it's not like suddenly brand new things pop up for them. It's usually the same thing, the same mindset, story, belief, fear, limitation. It's just wearing a different outfit, and we're just usually quicker and faster at noticing. Be like, oh, hello, old friend, welcome back, here you are. Okay, Lila says, okay, that makes sense. I'll find that video and rewatch it for the buyer personas. Thank you. If I think of it afterwards, I'll see if I can find it and drop the link here. Shari says, yes, I forget some of the most basic objections sometimes and only realize them when having one-on-one conversations that are not sales calls, but just relationship building combos. Yes, I think that's so helpful too, just for us to see how common these are and how we can just see them, not just in sales conversations, but to how they just really come up every day. I think you were talking about what I was saying in terms of selling in everyday day life, and just how these things come up for us, and how these are really just, they're just the stuff that comes up for us as a human. It's not always specific to buying and purchasing. And really, I think what's helpful to remember with that is, what I find helpful to remember is, these are patterns that tend to come up for us, or tend to come up for people we're selling to, pretty much with every decision they're making, right? So if I'm someone who wants to get the most out of something, right, that's probably something I have with every decision I make, not just if I'm going to spend money or make an investment. If I'm if I have a potential client who always feels like they're not ready and has a lot of perfectionism come up and always wants to make sure, they want to try to control everything and make sure everything is perfect so they can feel safe to do anything in life, right? That's probably going to be the same objection that comes up for them buying. So I think it's just helpful for us to see this isn't sales specific, this is human specific. Cassie says, you post on this rather often, and I find also that people fear so much of success, which holds people back from being able to move forward. 1,000%. I have been posting a lot on that recently, because I think just did a podcast on this, but I think that's just such a great astute point to put here. I think often on the selling side, we can think objections are only because people are scared to invest, or scared to spend money, or scared because they're not ready. And I find it is equally as true that people are so scared of success, and there really is something where it's now I'm going to put some money on the line we'll just keep using the gym example, right? If you have fear of success, like now I'm going to invest in a gym and I'm going to show up. What happens if I'm actually in shape? What happens if I actually have all the tools? All of what can come up around that. And so I spot on there. And I think it's just so helpful to remember these are just human things that come up. These are just normal human fears. And I think the more we can normalize that at any stage of business, and for clients who are at any stage of business as well on the other side, the easier it is to navigate this. Okay, let me pivot a little bit, because otherwise I realize I probably tried to put a little too much in this conversation. I could go down 14 rabbit holes here. But we just talked about how just noticing what can come up for you as a business owner and what stage of business you're at, and seeing where some of our own stuff can sometimes prevent us from wanting to walk through objections with potential clients, and just normalizing that this will come up and just noticing those so you can work through that yourself. Because and I've probably said this already, but just to really hit the bullet that I promised I would talk about here is, the mindset around sales objections, and the first objection to navigate that will help you increase conversions and make it easier for potential clients to navigate their own sales objections, is to notice the objections you have in yourself first and to walk through those yourself. And if that is, whether that's an objection of, oh shoot, I do feel like maybe my program isn't good enough, or it's too expensive, or I do feel like people shouldn't have objections because that means they're a bad client, or whatever noise can come up. Usually the easiest way to navigate an objection or have potential clients just navigate it themselves is to first walk through that and to work through that mindset stuff yourself. Because when you unwind that's going to affect everything from what you're speaking to in content, to what you're talking about in a live stream, to what you share in a podcast, to how you hold a sales conversation. And so much of that is going to be reflected, and people pick up on both the very conscious things you share as well as the subliminal messages we all share. So I talk so much about taking up space, right? And we forget this, and so sometimes we forget not all of the time. I think let's be very, very clear that people, of course, have their own objections, but some of the time when a potential client is reflecting an objection to you, it is a reflection of what you've literally been teaching someone through your messaging or your marketing, or the insecurities or stories you have coming up. Sometimes, not all of the time, I want to be so mindful of how I speak to that. And so I think that can just be helpful to remember. One of the easiest ways, and one of the first objections we have to overcome are those in ourselves. That's also going to be one of the easiest ways to both have someone overcome an objection before they even get on a call or to your landing page, but also it's just really tough to walk someone through something that in the back of your head, you're like, well, I kind of think you're right. Right? If you're listening to someone who's telling you that they're not ready, and in the back of your head, you're like, well, I only work with people who, like, if they're saying they're not ready, they're going to be a sucky client. It's going to be pretty tough to walk someone through that. Or if someone is telling you that they really want your program, but they can't afford it, and in the back of your head, you're like, yep, see, I knew it. I overcharged, or I'm charging too much for my program. No one will ever pay for this. It's too expensive. I don't know. I kind of want someone to say yes so I can prove to myself that my rates are right. It's going to be really tough to have that conversation with someone, or to speak to that in your content ahead of time. So I think just noticing, like, first and foremost, the easiest way, the most potent way to navigate objections sounds so cheesy, but to do the inside out work and to start there. Let's see. Wait, I just want to make sure. Okay, sorry. Comments do such a funny thing when you go live through, like, they pop up in a funny way here. Okay, Lila says, yeah, that's true for me. I was afraid that when I reached my money goal, I wasn't going to be responsible with it, or that I was going to lose it. So that really held me back. She's responding to Cassie on the fear of success, and we might need to, I did a podcast on that. We might need to do a whole live stream on that, because I think it's just such an important conversation. It's just so true. So I really appreciate you just reflecting that and normalizing that, because I think that's just such a real thing for so many people here. I think Shari's coming on that too. She said on that thread, I think the way many folks would articulate that isn't always fear of success, but more like worry about all the responsibility and overwhelm. of the cost of growing, having a larger business. So that's how we might speak to it versus how people might personally be relating to it. 1,000%. I really think a lot of people don't think of it as fear of success and wouldn't resonate with fear of success. And that's why it doesn't even seem like I don't have a fear of success, but it really is all of what comes with success. The running a big team, the haters that might come out and when you have more visibility, the paying more taxes, the more responsibility, the holding more clients, all of the things that come with that I think people can have a lot of fear around. 1,010%, Shari, really well said. Melissa said, I think the way you phrased it before is they've sold you on the bullshit. That's so, I think which part? Maybe you're talking about the belief part, but yes, the limiting beliefs. Oh, yes. That is, okay, now I know what you're talking about. For some reason, I can see the limiting beliefs part. Yeah, I think to bring it back to the objections, I think what we want to be mindful of is, this is whether it's an objection or, I know not everyone in this group obviously is a coach, but even if you're not a coach, when you're having a sales conversation or writing copy or writing a landing page, we're doing some form of coaching in those conversations. And I think the thing we always want to be mindful of is exactly what Lilith is referring to here, is it's just really easy to buy someone else's bullshit when we have the same bullshit ourselves. And I that sounds like such a harsh term. I don't mean this in a harsh way. It's just, I like to phrase it that way because it's easier for my brain to metabolize. If that feels harsh for you, we can call it a limiting belief. But again, going back to the beginning of our conversation at this live stream, when we're talking about objections, we're not talking about someone who's a no to your program and then trying to convince them to be a yes. We're talking about the person who's a yes to what you have to offer and has resistance coming up, has fear coming up, has stuff coming up. And when we haven't overcome the fear, the resistance, the stuff coming up in ourselves, that's what we're referring to as bullshit. We call that a limiting belief because I know that might not be palatable for everyone. It's just very easy to buy someone else's story as truth when we think that's true ourselves. And I think that just, again, becomes the first work for us to do, because it's also a lot to put on a potential client to say, hey, I need you to overcome this yourself so that you can make me feel better, so that you can help me change my narrative, so you can help me ease my fear, so that you can help me believe in myself, so that you can help me believe in my program, right? That's just a lot of responsibility and a lot of work to put on a potential client that I think just really is part of our role as a CEO and is part of our work. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you have to be perfect. I think just being really clear on really whose role that is. And when we're selling and putting a price tag next to something, I think it's our responsibility to be confident enough in what we're selling. You don't have to have perfect confidence to sell, but in what we're selling, in the value we're delivering, that we aren't asking someone else to make us feel better about it. Okay, I'm going to bring us back around here. Let's see. So that's the first objection to overcome. I think just really, if you did nothing else, and if you take nothing else from this conversation, I think that alone, and I think just remembering that at every stage of business, there might be a new objection you have within yourself, right? A new limiting belief. It might be a flavor of the same from before, but it might look a little different at different stages. And just to have that awareness, and not to make yourself wrong for being human, but to see that's just the first work. And when you overcome that in yourself, that is going to translate to everything you put out, to everything you do, to everything you say. And not to get super woo on this, but just in terms of literally how you're showing up energetically and being, right there, you know the difference when you're on a call with someone and they're like, yes, like we can do great work together, when you're feeling maybe a little rocky, and someone who's saying the words but is internally freaking the F out, or doesn't believe that, or is hoping that you're going to say yes to be so they can pay their rent or feel good about their offer or whatever that is. We can pick up on the difference. And so that's why if you can shift this in yourself, that's going to make it easier without you even having to have a conversation with someone to have potential clients overcome their own objections. Because sometimes people's objections aren't only about my fear, my security, my resistance. Sometimes it's they're picking up on your insecurity, on your objection. And again, not to say everything is being reflected to you, but sometimes that's what's being reflected back to you. Okay, but let's talk a little bit more on the practical side of things. We're talking a lot mindset here, which is important, and I do think that's probably the most important piece here, but I think we can also talk about what's a really practical way to have more people show up where they're ready to overcome their own objections, where you're leaning back a little bit more. You're leaning in while leaning back is the way I like to think about it. Because I think, again, this is how it doesn't have to feel slimy if you're thinking about how can we support people. So this is super obvious, but I think we forget about this. And that is doing more work up front before you make a pitch, before you have a call, before you take someone to a landing page. And again, I know this is so obvious, but I think sometimes the simplest way is the best way that leads to the biggest results, and we want to find the most complicated way. I don't have anything complicated for you, but I think this is just a thing we can forget. The more you educate people on the front end before you make an offer, and really educate them specifically on why you, and not just I think one of the big traps I see with clients, and I give a lot of notes on and content and copy around this. I think it's very easy to do work to educate your audience around the concept of what it is you do. I could do a lot of work on, or I could do a lot of content on the concept of why coaching is so powerful, and why why I believe one-on-one is like the bee's knees, and why that's the only thing I offer. But all that does is sell someone on the concept of coaching and one-on-one, and help overcome the objection someone might have in their mind. If they're like, should I invest in one-on-one? That's high touch support. Like, does that feel good? Not good? Which is great. But I think where you can really do more work for yourself on the front end is to bring that into why you and your offer specifically, and what you bring to the table specifically, and just spend more time upfront educating people with that. When I was saying at the beginning, one of the reasons I have a 90% closing rate, that sounds like such a weird way to say it. Whatever the terminology that isn't a gross way to say people who decide to sign with me on sales calls, one of the reasons is exactly transparently. It's not like, oh, I'm some unicorn. Part of the reason is I'm just doing more work on the front end, and I'm doing more work to educate people on why me, who I am, who I'm not, right? I hope I'm doing my job well, and that I think a lot of my content is pretty transparent, and there are certain things I speak to where it's like, you're going to know if I'm the right type of coach for you, and you're also going to know my thought process around things where you're like, oh, that is just, I don't want that at all, which is great, because I'm then filtering out those no's and those people who aren't a right fit that would have been a no on a call, because they wouldn't have been a good fit. They just don't ever make it to a call, because I'm filtering them out pretty quickly just with my content alone. And then additionally with things like, testimonials, we have social proof, we just have a lot of content out there. But I think the more you're doing that on the front end, and again, educating people on why you, not just the concept of you, but why you and your work specifically, but also really leaning into content that is specific to what you believe and think and your process around your work and how you approach things, and also what you don't believe in, right? Being really clear around your values. And the more you're speaking to that up front, the more you're going to have help potential clients overcome those objections, because you're building not only the relationship and trust, but you're teaching people why you versus the concept or idea of something. And that just helps a lot on the buying side. If I think about the gym example, and I'm just using that because it's just the recent investment and buying sales process I've went through, I overcame my own objection pretty much there. What was helpful is the way they sold me, or the sales process there, is they didn't sell me on the concept of why a gym. I have a gym in the building I live in. There's a gym across the street. They also didn't sell me on the concept of a nice gym with classes. There's two really high-end gyms, like walking distance to me. They really sold me specifically, and really did a great job before ever making me like a pitch or even hearing my objections, on helping me understand why that gym specifically was the only one that I'd want to go to, and like all of the benefits and all of the values, and just some of the values they have as a company. And that really helped me to overcome a lot of, I probably would have had a ton of other additional questions, concerns, resistance otherwise, or been like, why this one versus this one? What was great when I went there is I was either going to join that gym or nothing at all. And so that's what I mean by doing some of the work on the front end. They did a really great job on the front end. So I overcame a lot of those objections before we even had that sales conversation. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. I go on a riff and then I don't see comments. Shari says, where do you see the objections being revealed most often in your sales process? Is it typically on the sales call itself? I'm thinking, because I'm trying to think if because I just want to automatically say yes. I think, okay, I think a couple years ago, yes, I would see the sales objection show up on a sales call, and I still have that from time to time when it's someone who comes to me more cold, or someone who's a referral, or someone who, I have a client right now who I love, but she found my group, saw one post, booked a call, and hired me, right? So there was no, it wasn't like the traditional, like most people have been like reading my content for 6 months or have gotten to know me over a long period of time. So for her objection showed up. Her objection showed up before our call. So she canceled her call, and I navigated that for her to book the call. But I would say for someone like that, usually it is either in booking the call itself, or, like, and then canceling it, or in the sales conversation. But I would say simply because of, at this stage, most people have been, the majority of the clients I book have been in my world for a while and been consuming my stuff for a while. I would say now the sales objections are happening probably in my content, right? It's like before they ever book a call, and it's probably why they're not booking a call yet. And then that's where it's getting navigated. So by the time they get on a call, they're sort of like, I already know, I'm pretty sure, like, this is what I want to do. So it's a little bit different, but I would say in the past it would have been on the call or right before, and that booking that call. And I think maybe that's helpful for everyone to hear. People book consultations and people cancel them. That is an objection, and that is an opportunity to reach out to someone and see what's going on. I have an incredible client I love working with who wouldn't have been an incredible client I love working with if I'd seen that cancellation and been like, oh, well, that's just not for me, right? Instead of seeing like, oh, that's a normal human response, let me just find out what's going on there and open up that conversation. Shari, let me know if that answers that, because I feel like that was kind of like a half answer. But I'm trying to think from like different times in business. Kristen says, hi, Kristen. I can't imagine anyone doing this. I can't either. No one ever does this. I love you. Shari says, success rate, sign up rate. Yes, I like that so much better. I think sign up rate feels even better, because the reason I say that is, take this or leave this. I think no's in a sales process are successful as well. I think if it's successful if we're helping someone come to a clear decision on what it is they want and moving towards that. And if that's a no, and we're determining it's not a good fit, or this isn't the thing you want, or we don't have coaching chemistry, I still see that as a success. Maybe that's such a weird way to think about it, but I would so much rather have a clear, clean no, and for both of us to know and be like, I love you as a human. I would love to get a coffee with you. We're not the right fit to work together. Let me think of who to refer you to. Then that, like, I think what happens so often when we're just trying to get a yes, and by no means think you do this, Shari, but this is what's coming up as you say that. I think it's so easy for us to think like it's only successful if we get a yes, and then that's almost like the goal in a sales conversation, versus I really think it's successful just to come to a decision. So I love sign up rate for what we're talking about. Shari says, no, good answer. I was curious if you've seen a lot of people share it after the call and the follow-up process, or if it was more in the call conversation as well. I've definitely had people, though, tell me, the reason I'm pretty aware of like where that's happening is I've had plenty of people tell me on our call, like, oh, I almost booked a call 3 months ago, or it was this podcast I listened to, and I was like, that was the thing I needed to hear that had me finally book the call, which just shows me that there were objections, like, this is the thing I was worried about, or this is the thing I was hearing. So, and they'll share that sometimes when we're working together or on the call itself, but usually then by the time they've because it's scary to book a discovery call with people. Let's just call that how that is. I think it's so bogus for us all. I mean, no one here probably thinks that, but I think we sometimes think it's like, this is free. This is the easiest thing. I remember booking my first discovery call with, it was like a team member, and or maybe my first coach. It's like really scary to do. Anyway, I digress, but that's, I think, where it shows up now for the most part. Shari says, yes, I'm with you. Good decision. Good decision equals success. 1000%. Okay, so if you're going back to how to have potential clients overcome their own objections, I think, again, just the more you're doing on the front end and doing that on the front end so that we're really specifically teaching people why you, we're building that trust, we're building those relationships, we're helping understand people, not just why you, but why you in terms of like why you're an expert, but also understanding those values and also why not you, I think can be, and you don't necessarily have to write a post where it's like, here's why you shouldn't hire me, though I've definitely written one of those, and I think those can be really powerful also, but more in terms of the more you're willing, I find, to lean into, here's my thought leadership, here's what I believe, here's how I approach what it is I do, here's how I support my clients, here's what we're doing behind the scenes. Like, the more you're speaking to that, here's what I don't believe in, here's what I'm not for, here's what I'm a big hell fuck no to, excuse my French, right? The more you're leaning into that, the more you're teaching people on the front end, and the more that's going to help ease some of those objections, help people work through some of those things, or weed out those people that honestly just were never going to be a fit for your work or program in the first place. With that, I think the other two things you can really play with on the front end to make it way easier, and this is how, like, before someone even gets on the phone with you or to your landing page, because it's not just some of us are launching and we're not necessarily having a sales conversation, right? You're going to have a conversion event and pitch at the end and go to a landing page. I think the other two things we can think about that are really easy here to help people overcome their own objections before you even make that pitch. And again, this is so Captain Obvious. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't know. I think it is just helpful to have these reminders for us to look at, like, oh, let me just see where the opportunities are for me here. Giving more value before the pitch, this usually helps you qualify leads. I know everyone knows this. I know this is like, oh my gosh, Kim, you're not telling me brand new information. But I think we just sometimes forget that, and we want to make it more complicated, and we do want to think objections are so horrible and so hard and so scary, and they're either yucky and gross and manipulative if I talk about them, or I have to have a special way to talk to someone, and we'll talk about that for a second too. But there are all these things on the front end, and the more value you're giving, and this is why if you are in a launch, right, this is why people run conversion events. And if you're strategic and think about what objections do I know my people have, right, the more data you have, the more information you have around, these are just the common objections my people have, and these are the common questions, the concerns people have, how can I create value around that up front? The more you're doing that, the more you're going to help people overcome those objections before you ever even make a pitch. The gym probably knew, hey, there's another high-end gym down the street, and most of the buildings here have gyms in them. There are going to be a couple concerns, there's going to be a couple objections, there's going to be a couple things everyone here probably has that we need to create some value, create some content, walk someone through the gym, give them a free class, like have something that's going to help navigate and speak to that before we even make the pitch, right? All of the things they walked me through, they let me take a free class. Actually, I joined this gym before it opened, but a lot of gyms, when they open, once they're open, will let you take a free class, for example. That's free value. Why are they doing that? Obviously, it's, to taste it and reciprocity, a taster and reciprocity, but some of it is also what we're talking about here. So nothing that's like brand new information, but I think just seeing like that is one of the secrets that's going to help you qualify leads. And I think the other thing you can also play with is how can you, in your content, use your content to qualify your leads a little bit more. So I talk about this a lot, where it's not just growing a huge audience and having lots of leads, but I'd rather you have a small audience and really learn how to bring in the right kinds of leads, meaning not like good people, bad people, but the types of leads that are going to be the right fit for your program or offer. And when you're focused on that, you're just going to be navigating a lot of the concerns that people have up front so that they can overcome that themselves. And I think the other really Captain Obvious thing here, let's see. Shari says, yes, I'm so grateful we did that work early on in my coaching business to refine my position, express my values and content, because I think it's so serving right now as the industry culture is shifting and AI usage is skyrocketing. So valuable and often challenging to do for your own work. so true. And I think the AI piece, haven't even really talked about that today, but I think that's just such a good part to bring in here. And I think it's just so helpful for us to see. It sounds so obvious, but just because it's obvious and simple doesn't always mean it's easy, especially to do for ourselves. So I'm both being a little silly where I'm like, I know this isn't brand new information, but I also think for someone listening, if your head's a little bit like, oh, but this feels hard for me, or like, why haven't I done this? Or I don't know if I'm doing this right. I think just also normalizing this can just exactly what Shari is saying. Sometimes it's just challenging to do in our own work, or to see the forest for the trees for ourselves, or to be able to do for ourselves. So just I appreciate you because you're also normalizing that, Shari. Lila says, I think the thing that really helped me step into that giving value tip is leaning 100% into giving value without expectation and being completely okay with it if they don't become a client. Yes, I like those are my big praise hands. I think that's the whole thing here. And this is just the whole thing with sales. Both you probably know that's just so much of what I preach is how can we give value without the expectation of, because that then becomes something where it's like when someone gives you a gift because they're only giving you a gift because they expect you to give them one back, like on their birthday or something, or it's like, ugh, that's so yucky. And that's like, that comes with all of these strings attached, as opposed to, I'm just giving freely. And then with that, let me just see what comes back. And I think that again is also just going to be the type of value and the type of energy, and not like woo manifesting energy, that I'm here for that too, but energy in terms of how you're thinking, showing up, and being in the delivery of that value is going to feel so different, which is also going to help minimize some of the objections people have, because again, sometimes people are just feeling that like stickiness where it's like, oh, why does this feel so weird? I can see there's value here. I can see someone's great at what they do, but something just feels really sticky around this. And sometimes it's just that piece there that you're talking about, Lilith. Shari says my connection dropped, so I don't know if you already answered my cue about the objections you get specifically, or if I missed it, I can catch on the replay. No, I might have missed your question, or I totally missed that up here. So no, thank you. She said, how can you share how you identified your audience's top objection and what those look like in your business? I think the easiest thing for me, quite honestly, is I still have calls with, and I know you know the Shari, but just for people who don't know, I still have a sales call with every single person. And we offer free coaching calls now too. So it's really the easiest way for me to know my objection is I'm getting on the phone with people. So and I just always have. So that's just the easiest data for me. But I would say aside from that, the other way I know a lot of my clients' objections or potential clients' objections is it shows up in the pre-session questionnaire we send before a discovery call. Even if they're not spelling certain things out, we have one or two questions in there just in terms of like readiness and being ready to make an investment, and what if they've gone to my website and what offer they're interested in. And usually just even in how people respond there, they'll kind of give me an idea of what's coming up for them in terms of an objection. So even like before someone gets to a call, I usually have a pretty good idea with that. And then I would say, I'm just trying to think if I would say that, it's just always the easiest when you're having calls with people. I would say for people who maybe aren't having calls with someone, or if you're like, for example, someone's like booking a call and not having the call, I think this again sounds so obvious, but I think just being willing to reach out to people and, ask them what's going on, or ask them, saying you're really working on improving the delivery of your offer, and wanting to understand your people better and what's going on for them, and that you're just curious if they wouldn't mind sharing with you. You're not trying to change their mind or anything like that, but if they wouldn't mind sharing with you what had them cancel their discovery call, or what had them go to the sales page and buy and not go to the sales page and not complete the purchase, if you have that kind of data. But I think sometimes just asking people can be really helpful as well. So anyway, that's how I know. Biggest objections that come up for me, I would say the investment, I think, is just always probably the biggest one. It's interesting because with revenue share, I get that objection far less, especially for business owners who are who are used to making investments. I think If anything, then the objection is a little bit more trying to understand revenue share, and either trying to understand, like, if I blow my business up, what does that mean in terms of, like, just trying to wrap their head around profit sharing versus, and like just the safety security around kind of knowing what they're going to pay, because I think revenue share is such a great way to partner with someone and meet them where they're at, and it can feel a little sticky for someone who's new to it in terms of, I don't know how to predict what I'm going to pay you, and or it feels weird to pay this amount of revenue out. So I think that can be something that comes up, but more the safety piece around it. And then I would say for newer business owners, I think I'm one of the least expensive coaches with the experience I have and client results I have. And I just say this because I think it's, sorry, I know you think this way as well, but I think just for other people, I think I'm both one of the most inexpensive coaches, and there's no part of my brain that thinks what I charge is inexpensive. And I think both can be true at the same, like on the same token, where I know I could charge more. I know in terms of what the market charges because of revenue share. I mean, obviously clients are paying far more, but some clients aren't. My base rate, I think, is very, very inexpensive, and I think that could almost like throw some people off and be an objection. I did have that objection, Shari, years ago. I had someone not hire me because it was too inexpensive. And also, it's like in any part of our world, people are making a big investment when they're investing in coaching. So that is, I would say, especially for new business owners, that's the objection. And then all the stuff that comes up under that for people in terms of the fear, where it's like, what if my business doesn't work? What if I can't get results in 6 months? So I think those are other things that come up a lot. Okay. Let's see here. Can you, yes, oh no, I'm in a different part now. Oh, Shari said yes, I'll have it, but she was responding to Lilith. Shari, let me know if I answered your question, because I was just going like through, I was like just thinking through like recent clients, but let me know if that's helpful, and if that's helpful in terms of how I know. And if there's another question you had there, happy to dig into that. Well, I'm waiting to see if there's a question there. In terms of what else you can do to have potential clients overcome their own objections, the other two pieces I was going to share here, and I know I always do this, we go a little over. I'm gonna get us wrapped in the next 10 minutes so that I can then go to the gym I'm mentioning, go to my spin class. But I think what can be really helpful, and again, this is nothing that no one doesn't know, but I think a helpful reminder to check in with. I know I've probably heard this before, and someone has said this before, and this is a good thing to do, but am I actually doing this? Is to get clear, like Shari asked me, like, what are some of the common objections people have? These are some of the common objections people have for my work. And to think about not only what's the surface level objection, because I always want to think about when I'm thinking about objections, there's the objection someone has, an objection from the lens we're talking about. They want what you're selling, and there's a question, there's a concern, there's a fear. So they want one-on-one coaching, they want to work with me, and the concern is it's expensive, or the concern is I don't know how I feel about revenue share and like making so much money, like not knowing how to like know how much money I'm going to be paying in through revenue share, right? Let's just say those are the two main ones. So then speaking to this and navigating this and sharing your thoughts in content around this regularly, but not just from the lens of, I think this is valuable, right? I love to share, hey, I walk my talk. I invest in my own coach. I invest in my business. I have invested multiple six figures over the last 7 years. I haven't done the math on it, so I don't want to make up false numbers, but that I feel very confident in saying. And like, I think we can speak to that, where it's like, of course, people invest in support, and of course, people invest in business. I think that kind of content is helpful, but I think what is really helpful in terms of having potential clients overcome their own objections when it comes to working with you specifically, it's sort of like what we were talking about earlier, where it's not just having content that's speaking to the concept of your offer or your work. Here, it's not just content speaking to the concept of investing or buying. That is valuable. But I think if you can think about, who are my people? What is their common objection? And what's the thing under the thing for them? Why are they having that objection, right? So if I think about the person who wants to work with me and they're a little concerned about revenue share and like just not being able to predict their revenue, right? Can I think about like what's coming up for them under that? Or if I think about the person who wants to work with me and it's like, yes, I'm both one of the least expensive coaches, but also it's still very expensive, and their concern is the investment and like being able to get all their everything they need within 6 months. Can I both speak to that objection and content, but also think about for my person what's coming up for them under that? Is it because they got burned in another program and they're worried that's going to happen again? That tends not to be my people so much, but just using that as an example. Is it because they've been through a lot of programs and they didn't show up for the program? That is some of my people, right? Is it because they're really worried, they're just not trusting themselves and they're scared that, like, I trust you, Kim, but like, what if I'm the one client business strategy doesn't work for, and what if I don't get results, or what if I can't pay the payment? Right? And if there are fears like that, can I get clear on what are those things under the thing? And can I create content around that? And so I think that's where this is taking us to the next level of like, yes, absolutely. Take an audit of your content. Are you looking at what are the objections, the concerns, the questions, the fear that come up for my people? But am I taking that one step deeper and thinking about what is it underneath that's coming up for people, and how can I speak to that? How can I create some safety around that? How can I address that? How can I help someone navigate that, give them a question, give them a tool? And that is a way in which you can help someone to overcome an objection before they ever get onto a call with you or land on your landing page. Shari says, yes, I know we've had this conversation before. It's like the 1K plus per month is relatively expensive compared to rent, food, etc., but very low compared to market rate for biz coaching and ROI. Exactly. And I think that's just helpful for, this kind of goes back to the further you get in business when you're growing and scaling, especially when you've gotten used to making bigger investments, I think it's almost easy to lose sight of that, right? I pay my coach a base rate plus a percentage. I pay her. I did not come up with revenue share. My coach Lacey Sykes did, and that's where I borrowed that model from. I pay her the same model. And so as my business has grown, I've paid exponentially more in coaching. I pay quite a bit per month. I pay quite a bit to my team every month. It's easy to almost be like, oh, well, what I charge is cheap in comparison, and for the experience I have and for the results and whatever. Or I know that our coach is charging $50,000 or $60,000 or $30,000 for Voxer support per month, or whatever people are charging, right? So it's easy to have that, and then I think that's a really easy way for us to lose sight of what can also be coming up for someone. So you hit the nail on the head, Shari, and I think that just goes back to the conversation we were having earlier in this live stream, just in terms of how we can unintentionally almost block ourselves from being able to have these conversations with people, because we forget the dichotomy there. Is there anything else I wanted to say there? Just in terms of speaking to objections, I really invite everyone to take a look at your content over the last month and see, have I spoken at all to what I know is a common objection for my people? And awesome if you have. Two, if I have I spoken on it on a surface level? That's great. But what would it look like if have I spoken to it on the next level down in terms of really what's coming up for someone? If not, what's my opportunity here? What would I want to say to someone? What do I wish people knew? How can I lean into that? And I think that's just an opportunity for everyone, and not to have this live stream be all about this, but like, let's just be real. Our industry just isn't, and like Shari said, with the AI going on, and just, there's just a lot in our space right now. There's a lot of people, it's loud, it's crowded, people are not quite sure what's going on. I think customer journeys are longer than they used to be. This is one way to help close that gap in your customer journey, to create a little more trust, to help people overcome those objections before they ever get on the call with you, before they land on your sales page. Okay, the last one here that I need, that I think is helpful here, and this is what I think Lilith said in a comment earlier, in terms of how to have potential clients overcome their own objections. I think this is going to be more something that happens on an actual sales conversation, or if you're doing a conversion event and you're having that live conversation or that Q&A, but it's really what Lilith was speaking to earlier. And I think that's remembering, and I'm not going to go through a whole like how to have those conversations because we're way over today, and whoever wants the sales course can get that. But I think it's remembering that part of this is also being willing to lean into the conversation while leaning back. Because again, it's always leaning in while leaning back. And what I mean by that is being willing to open up the conversation with someone, right? Not co-signing someone's bullshit or their limiting beliefs like we were saying earlier, but also being willing to open up the conversation with someone in a way where you're not just telling someone what to think. You're not just telling someone, no, you're wrong, or only giving someone, I think one way to navigate a sales objection, which is absolutely not wrong, but is to just give a different perspective. And I think that is one way. But I think there are ways to have these conversations with someone where, again, they're a yes and stuff is coming up with them, to coach someone around this, to lean into the conversation instead of being like, let me tell you what you should think, let me try to manipulate you around this, or this feels so uncomfortable, let me just bounce off the conversation or bounce out of the conversation completely. To lean into the conversation, but to really open it up with some questions, with some checking in, with some reflections, with giving people some different options to think about, with, I think one of the most helpful things to look at and a way to help someone overcome their own objection is to remember that most objections, when someone is a yes for what you sell, right, and this is more a fear or a question, oftentimes it's either literally they have a question that needs to be answered, right, me in the gym, like something I need to navigate, and they need someone to give them space to work through that, or oftentimes it's a pattern that is coming up for them, that probably came up for them and is probably related to the reason they want to hire you and get support in the first place. And the more you can notice what's the thing under the thing and open up a conversation around that and highlight that and give someone the opportunity to process, to work through that, the more you allow someone to process through and come to their own decision and overcome their own objection. I find for the majority of people I have conversations with, especially because of all the things we're talking about here, right? Having content and value and social proof and overcoming objections and content, right? Doing more work to qualify, bringing in the right leads to those calls in the first place. So when we're talking, it's more something like we're seeing if this is a fit, less let me try to teach you who I am. But I think if we're doing all of that, of course, it's going to be easier. But of course, objections still come up. And I find most people then, especially if they're a qualified lead, when they have an objection, right? If we don't think about sales for a second, if we use the example of I want to get into shape and I want to get really fit and I've got some objections, right? I've just got some fears. I've got some resistance. We were talking about the fear of success. Like I'm worried about all the time it's going to take me to go to the gym or whatever's coming up for me. So often I already know what I want, right? And what I'm looking for is space for someone to hold for me to be able to talk myself into what it is what I want. Let me know if that's tracking for everyone here, right? And I find for most people, when they know what it is they want and they're a yes to what it is you offer, if you're willing to open up that space for them, to coach them through that, to offer some reflections, to ask some questions, but to basically give them the space to talk, most people will talk themselves into or out of. But if they talk themselves out of, then they probably weren't a yes to begin with, right? Like then that actually means the decision for them that's right is a no. But if they're actually a yes, most people will just talk themselves into what it is they want to buy. Most of us just need that space to do that. My husband will confirm this for you. Most of the time when I'm not sure on something, I just need him to listen for me to like verbally process basically talking through something, which is basically me convincing myself on why I'm going to spend the money or get the thing or invest in the thing. When I invested in my coach, we just renewed, so 5.5 years ago, right? I knew what I was going to do. I knew it wasn't actually a money concern. I had the money put aside. That was my top level concern. I just needed to verbally process and talk through that. I overcame my own objection before I even had a conversation with her. So I reflect that because I think that sometimes we forget, and I think sometimes we almost overwork this part of the conversation because we haven't overcome them ourselves or because someone taught us to say X, Y, and Z. And I think sometimes we forget that lean in while leaning back. Lean in to have the conversation. Lean in to make the reflection. Lean in to ask the question. Lean in to say, hey, I'm not scared of talking about this, while leaning back to let someone just giving someone space to figure their stuff out. Sometimes that is the most powerful thing you can do. And if someone really wants something, most people will talk themselves into the decision they've already made. They just need the space to get there on their own. Shari says, thank you for your share. It's fun to have you in my workday. Fun to get to hang with you on your workday, right? And it's also earlier for you right now. Lilith says, Alex Catoni recently, I don't know who that is, recently said the same thing about the client journey getting longer. Her recent stats show that even in her business, there needs to be, this thing's popped up, 34 touch points before they buy in 2023. I don't know who that is, but I need to look that up. And I think to confirm that, and just for everyone, to normalize this for everyone, 34 touch points I hadn't heard, but I think that's great to hear. What I have heard from, why can't I not think of her name? Emily Hirsch talked about how they've been seeing 50 to 60 micro touch points before someone becomes, I think a micro touch point could be like a post or a piece of content before someone becomes a client. So I think just normalizing that for everyone, I think that I heard from her last year. I think it might have even gone up. And I think the, in general, even before 2023, most people who have a higher ticket, higher touch, higher commitment offer, in general, we're talking generalizations, are probably going to have a longer customer journey, right? If I sell a $27, I don't know, what does lip gloss cost? If I sell a $12, $22 lip gloss, it's a lower ticket item and there's a lower barrier to entry and there's less of a commitment in terms of I don't have to show up for this and bare my soul for 6 months. I just have to spend the money and hopefully like the lip gloss. So there's probably going to be I'm still going to need touch points to buy this specific lip gloss, but there's a shorter customer journey. If we're looking at, most of us are selling high ticket, larger investment, not just monetarily, but time-wise and vulnerability-wise from a client and risk-wise from a client, the larger that gets, generally speaking, the more touch points we need and the longer the customer journey. And then I think overall, for various reasons, economy, industry, saturation, that is increasing for most people in our space. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's helpful for anyone to know who's newer in business because I think it can make you think you're doing something wrong. I think for someone who's further along in business, like I'm super blessed in that I don't feel it the same way because I've already got people at different stages in the customer journey kind of popping up at any given time. But if you're newer to business and you're building that pipeline, right, I think it's just helpful to know this and to remember this so you're not making yourself wrong and thinking, why is this not happening? It might just be that the seeds you're planting just need a little bit more watering before they're gonna sprout. And just knowing that's across the board. I think I've seen that through clients. I've seen that in peers. I'm hearing that in peers who are in different spaces. So just to normalize for everyone, but also so people can understand kind of why that happens. Okay. I'm gonna run in a moment. I just saw Cassie. I've got to run and grab my kids. But thanks, Kim. Thanks for being here, Cassie. I think you're the winner of our giveaway, just so you know. So we'll make sure we get that to you because Lilith gave it away. Y'all were here live, and I think Shari has it already. And I'm gonna wrap this up as well because I've got to get to my spin class, and I've kept y'all. Thank you for hanging with me. Let's see. Lilith says she's a marketer and copywriter coach. Found her on YouTube. Cool. That's so good to know. It's always good to know good names. Let's see. These are popping around. Lilith says, yeah, I've also heard the 60 micro touch points. Shari says, gotta go, but appreciate you. Appreciate you too. Thank you for being here, Shari. Lilith says, yeah, it's helpful to know, kind of like your last week's video about leveling the expectations on how long it can take. Exactly. Cassie said, oh yeah, I'm so excited. Yay, I'm so glad you're excited. We'll DM you to make sure we get your email address for that. So we'll send that over to you, send you a heart back. And everyone watching now and on the replay, because we'll have people on the replay as well. Thank you for hanging. Let me do a quick recap here. I know we went super long today. I so appreciate y'all hanging with me. We had so many great questions that I didn't want to hop off, and it's fun for me to get to jam with y'all. But next week, again, don't forget we have our free masterclass, Who I Had to Become to Make reoccurring multi-5-figure cash months, and how to define and own your role as a CEO for your own big result on repeat. We will drop the link for that. I would love to have you. When you sign up, you'll be entered to win a free coaching session, and we're giving a playbook away with this that you'll get when you sign up that walks you through the journaling prompts so you can use this exercise we're going to walk through at every stage of business as much as you want to. That will be a longer live stream next week. I tend to go a little longer on the master classes, even though today was pretty long. And then tomorrow, if you're on Instagram, we'll have that industry chat with Tinley Yarrington, who's an OBM and thought strategist, thought partner. We're going to dig into delegating and level setting expectations with your team like a CEO. That should be a really fun conversation. And if you're listening to the podcast, don't forget, we've got a second episode dropping on Thursday. We now have 2 episodes per week, which also means, because that episode is a you ask, I answer question, where I answer one of your questions. If you have a question you want me to answer on a future episode, DM me, drop it in the Facebook group, email me. We'll have a form eventually. We haven't gotten around to doing that yet, but send that my way. We'll make sure we answer that. Says thank you for today's video. See you next week in the masterclass. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for all your great questions. I love you all so much. I will see you next week. Bye.